something, but I don't know if we disagree on much. But I wanted to see if we do. So,
That's a trash
what do you
can.
do, man?
Who's that in the background? So I do basically anything in philosophy. So just shoot
Okay.
your shot,
What
Jim
is
Jump.
your view on normative, meta, and applied ethics? What are your views on those?
Moral realist, the normative ethics, I'm a rule utilitarian, and
Okay.
applied ethics with respect to which topics? Death penalty, or capital punishment, or abortion, or
Abortion, death
veganism.
penalty, and those. Yeah. I don't care about
Death
veganism
penalty,
that much.
okay, in some cases. Abortion,
Okay.
it is it is immoral to abort. It's like elective abortion is immoral, so that's just the case. Elective
Yeah, but
abortion
would you make it
is
illegal?
not, excuse me,
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but would you make it illegal?
would I make it illegal? Abortion? Elective abortion?
Yeah. Yeah. Would you
Yeah,
make it illegal?
I think the purpose of laws, which inherently are action guidance, is to reflect the moral facts. And so it should not be something which is mapping onto the purpose behind creating and constructing these laws. So yeah, of course. Elective abortion,
Yeah.
yeah,
Do
make
you
it
take?
illegal.
Mhm. Yeah.
In
Do
the
you think
condition
that?
where it's delayed, they did not get raped.
Uh-huh. Okay. Do you take that every single non-medical abortion is going to be the elective one? Like even the case of like incest and rape. Do you think that those are also the
By
ones that you would ban? Or
definition, they would be, but I specify that there are exceptions in the category of elective abortions, which
oh, okay, I
would be
didn't hear you.
okay.
Yeah, it's fine. I didn't hear. Okay, then there's not much that I disagree on that. Rule
Yeah.
utilitarianism. Do you think, since you're a realist, do you take some objectivist theory view where they're objective goods or no?
Um, Objective goods. Just lay out the definition for me. Give me some examples also, if you want.
Like examples. Do you think that like health, bodily autonomy, love, do some objective goods that we strive for, or they're like
Okay.
objectively good for us?
What do you mean by objective good?
Some good, independent of your preference or desire.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, then yeah, I agree to that view as well. At
Yeah, there are
least I
things
could
which are
agree to the view.
objectively disvaluable, like pain, for example. No.
Yeah, to the view because it's my view is like somewhat similar. Uh, okay, since I agree on that, what type of more realist, if I remember, or no?
I don't make any claims on the nature of moral properties or facts, like if they're natural or non-natural facts. Could care less.
Uh-huh. Do you care about the truth
Yeah.
makers or no?
Truth makers of moral propositions.
Yeah, like are you relaxed?
Yeah. Depends on how you cash the terms out.
Yeah, like is there something in the world which makes like a statement being is wrong true or something like that?
Something that exists in the world, like external to the mind.
No, no, like in a way where like something
Or just
in is
something
there
which
something
exists.
in the world or like something which makes this thing is wrong true? Does this something in the world exist?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there's something in the world which makes every statement true.
Okay, then yeah, I can also see that. Because we agree almost on everything on ethics. What are your views?
I'm a non-physicalist. I am. Uh, I believe in an external world. Clearly, I believe that God exists. Clearly, there are more topics I do, I guess, but I just can't think of them right now. So,
Yeah, what's your opinion on feminism? Let's just say that.
free will exists.
I agree.
I
What do
think
you
determinism. I think. What's up?
what is your view on idealism?
I'm an idealist.
Yeah, me too. Uh, what what is your view on? No, I cannot even. I agree. There's nothing for me to debate you on.
Well, I could, if you want me to, I could devil's advocate on one of the propositions.
No, I don't really like to do that. I mean, if you want to, sure, but I really like devil's advocating. But
I don't think it's going to impact the results of the debate. but I can devil's advocate on, like, for example, idealism. Why
Yeah,
do you think
you want to
idealism
wait?
is
Do you
sure
want to maybe
over?
do this? Do you want me to like defend a position and you just play agnostic on it and try to defeat the argument, or like do you want
Yeah,
to
and I could
maybe do
even give
that?
potential arguments for the position I don't even believe in. So yeah, we could talk about, say,
Okay.
dualism, or I don't
Um.
know, fill of mind. You're a non-physicalist, right? So yeah, just give your
Yeah.
argument. Or not.
Um. I mean, I'm not really. Do you maybe want to do something more ethics related? I'm not really up for the like
Sure.
convo for like non-physicalism. Do you want to do maybe my normative ethical view, my meta-ethical view? Which one are
Yeah, we
you
can.
go
What's
for?
your normative ethical view, by the way?
It's like a conjunction. Maybe to cash out in views. Maybe to understand it, like when you put in
A
conjunction of views.
conjunction.
It is. Yeah, it's like a conjunction of Aristotelian virtue ethics and his ethics
Mm-hmm.
in conjunction with objectivist utilitarianism. So I do
Okay, I
agree.
can. I for one, I can just defend the opposing view, right? So we can just debate on this. So
Okay, sure,
I'll just take the position that your position is not correct. Are you okay with that?
sure. We can do that. Let me
Okay, so
just.
here's the obvious reason. First evidential reason as to why your position is incorrect is because your position is a conjunct of two independent views. So each independent
Uh huh.
view is going to be something which, excuse me? Hello?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just hopped on my PC because my phone is about to die. I'm sorry.
Interesting. So, as I was going to say, the reason as to why your position is not okay is because it is the case that your position is less parsimonious than each independent conjunct of the conjunction, which is your position. And so there's evidence favoring either of the conjuncts being sure over the conjunction, which is what your position actually is being sure. Wraps.
Okay, so
Like
I
that's it,
didn't
right?
I didn't hear the last part. I know that you said something about them being two independent positions. Like, do you think they're completely incompatible, or is there something that makes them so?
Ah, ah, oh shit.
Wait, are you good, bro?
Nah, I'm. It's like your question. It was just, I'm flabbergasted. So we asked the question one more time.
Yeah, that was rhetorical. But wanted to ask you, do you is that something which like makes them so incompatible that I cannot hold the view, or what do you mean when you say it's like independent?
This community is fucked. Holy shit. Look, I'm not making that claim clearly. I'm just saying they're independent. Okay? That's all I'm saying. This comment's cooked. Like, if this is our new debaters, this comment. But no, Freedagoat, I'm not making this claim. I'm not.
Okay, so then what was the point of you saying you cannot hold that because they're completely two separate views? Why cannot they be in
I never
conjunction?
said that. Make that claim. I said to you that it is the case with evidential reason against your position because believing in just one of the individual conjuncts is is more parsimonious than believing in the conjunction which is identical to your position. I'm
Uh-huh.
not making any
So
epistemic
I
normative
don't
claim.
are you referring to some like form of like ontological simplicity or numerical simplicity? Because if it's
I'm
ontological, then we
talking
can
about
get into that.
ideological parsimony.
Okay, what do you mean by ideological one? I'm not familiar with
Yeah,
that.
it's just minimizing the amount of assumptions made or propositions made independently. Yes.
Okay, so it's reference to assumption specifically. Okay. Then
hmm
when you're referencing that, what assumption do I posit specifically?
Well, depends on what you mean by an assumption, right? Right. In this case, you'd have to show why we have reason to posit both. Independently of any reason you presented for positing both, it would be an assumption. Because currently, given the current evidence, there's no reason. And
I
so
don't
that
think
would be
it's
evidence for my position.
uh-huh. I don't think that's I don't think what I posit is an assumption. I rather think it's an added explanation. So I think that's rather referring to numerical ideological simplicity rather
Are
than
you
some form
saying,
of ontological ideological simplicity, though.
are
Like
you
I don't think.
stating that neither of the conjuncts is a sufficient explanation for the moral data?
No, I do think for the moral data. I just don't think that what you're saying is you're referring to
That's a
ideological parsimony, but I
self-dunk
don't
though,
think.
right?
Wait, hold on.
This is
I
like a
don't think
this is
that.
like a classic self-dunk moment, right? Because what you just did
Wait,
was fuck yourself
wait,
up,
hold
right?
on. I think when you're referring
Okay.
specifically to wait, hold on. When you're referring to ideological parsimony specifically, I don't think you were referring to assumptions here. I think you were referring to
Sorry for the
explanations.
background noise. Could you repeat yourself, please?
Yeah, so I don't think what you're referring to is the assumptions. I think you were referring to something like numerical simplicity rather than ontological or ideological one. Like when you say that I'm referring to assumptions, I don't think I'm referring to assumptions. I think I'm rather referring to explanations. And I'll maybe even
If it
grant, right?
if it is the case,
My throat is killing me. Maybe if it is the case, right? Hypothetically, yeah, can maybe even grant that on the first glance, my view can be numerically um numerically more complex, but I don't really care when it comes to probability. I don't really care for numerical simplicity. Like, I really don't.
you don't care about the amount of independent propositions asserted in a given theoretical landscape. That's what you're
When it
telling
come
me.
when it comes to explanations, no. Like, I'm not just
Okay.
gonna
So
reject.
you understand that explanations are
Uh-huh.
propositional?
They're propositional. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So again, if it is to be the case that you have two independent conjuncts, which is what the explanation is identical to explain the given data, and you're stating this to be the true explanation or the true proposition, given the multiplicative axiom, it would actually be something which decreases the probability of that proposition, which is an explanation.
I don't think that is the case for numerical simplicity. Again, when you're referring to explanations, for example, you're not just gonna reject a particle just because it posits like one more proton or like fucking neutron in it. You're not just gonna reject that
You
fucking
would if
particle.
there's no evidence favoring it.
No, you
I'm
kind of
sorry, not
wouldn't.
Rasan. Pretty good. You would.
The fact that you just called me Rizan kind of offended me. But when you say something like, no, I understand. I understand.
I
But
mean, Rasan is
please try
better
to
than you, but
Yeah, y'all
it's fine.
debate the same way, so that makes.
aye, buddy. But anyways, when you're referring to numerical one, and when you say something like when you're referring to set propositions in a way which are in reference to explanations, like for example, if I tell you the reason why you're coughing is because you have COVID, and the reason why you are tired is also because you have COVID, but then somebody says, well, actually, no, you are tired and you are coughing because you have COVID and you have mononucleosis. Even if they explain how mononucleosis is relevant, I don't think what they're saying is if they get to the same conclusion, I don't think what they're saying is less probable. I just
Of
like
course it would.
I still wouldn't. I
If
don't know. I don't
we
think
if we
it's
have
less probable.
give me the distinguishing feature, okay, between that example and me saying the reason as to why it is the case, right, that this house is in front of me is because of construction workers building this house, and me saying the reason as to why this house is in front of me is because of a bunch of construction workers who build this house, as well as a bunch of leprechauns also helping the construction of this house. You would clearly believe that that proposition right there, right, the latter one is less likely than the first one, right? Correct?
If the leprechaun thing is just an assumption, yeah, I would agree. But if it's something which adds on to
An assumption is
explanation,
something which has no evidence for
okay.
it. The example you've given, and it literally reflects a case scenario where there's no current evidence for someone having mononucleosis. So
No,
it would be an assumption.
sure it is not. Sure it is not.
That's
Because
the
when you
point,
say
right? That's the point, right? So it would
no,
be less
it's
likely.
definitely not an assumption. Like it's definitely not.
What the
You say
fuck? Wait,
something like
sorry. Wait, sorry. You caught me off guard. That was retarded. Wait, just repeat that, please.
it's not an assumption if I tell you you have because being tired and coughing is something which can be correlated to the sickness called mononucleosis. So if I add on an explanation, which is that you have mononucleosis with COVID and not just COVID, right? And I explain why, me and you both get to the same conclusion, but on a first glance, I'm just positing one more explanation.
So
I don't
what
think
you're
that's something
telling
which is
me,
going to lead to probability because it's not a assumption, it's rather an explanation. That's why I don't care for numerical simplicity because it's
what the
retarded.
fuck?
I would agree to an ontological one if you said ontological simplicity. I don't care for the numerical one though. I already clarified
A
that.
couple of things. So what you're telling me, two claims you made which are really contentious, perhaps even retarded. Because there's a correlation between mononucleosis and these symptoms, then it is the case that having these symptoms is evidence for you having mononucleosis.
No, you're
Mononucleosis, sorry.
retarded. That's not
Which
what I
is,
said. So when I
stop
say
talking.
I
something
know,
like,
no,
You
no,
piece
no,
of
no, no, no,
garbage.
no,
You
no,
piece
no.
of
We're not doing
garbage. I'm
this.
still
We're
talking.
having moderation, okay? The other
Yeah,
will do
we're
the
having
sure,
moderation.
sure,
moderation.
sure,
Yeah,
sure, sure.
definitely.
Okay, free
Yeah.
Jill, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Don't know why this piece of garbage just interrupts my point. But look, the point I'm making is simply that you're telling me, okay, that because there is a correlation between having mononucleosis and these symptoms, then having these symptoms is evidence for having mononucleosis. What it means for something to be an assumption is for something to not have any evidence for it. So if you're rejecting the claim that making the assertion that this person also has mononucleosis is an assumption, if you're saying that's false, then you'd have to be saying there's evidence for it. But clearly, just because there's a correlation between these symptoms and this given illness, clearly, right, that's not evidence for it, right? And you'd believe this, it would be an assumption. Lastly, you said, well, it's an explanation, not an assumption. Buddy, these are not mutually exclusive. You can have explanations which are assumptions. Like, you're making it out to be the case that explanations are inherently distinct from assumptions. You fucking idiots. Majority of explanations are assumptive in nature. Okay, so you saying it's an explanation does not debunk it being an assumption, because you can have explanations which are assumptions. You need to clock in, man.
Okay. I know I was muted. I didn't even interrupt him after I was warned. But yeah, first of all, you're retarded. I didn't say that. Second of all, that's why it is always a retarded comma when I'm talking about numerical simplicity, because you don't know what it means. So when we're referring to numerical simplicity, we're not referring to the number of assumptions. We're referring to the number of explanations, retard. So when I say something like you have COVID and mononucleosis, it can be in reference. Obviously, the symptoms can be correlated to mononucleosis, right? And that can be an explanation rather than assumption, because assumption can be the equivalent to explanation, but explanation is not always going to be equivalent to an assumption. In a way that to explain it better is, if I have a backed up scientific evidence for something being the case, right, and then I show it to you, right, and if I have on another hypothesis H2, which says it also posits some scientific explanations which is backed up by I don't know, biology, or it doesn't really matter which domain you want to go for, but one just posits like more explanations in a way. It just gets to it just uses a different method to how they get to the said sickness or said conclusion. That doesn't mean that it's gonna be less probable. Like when we're talking about how you get a mutation of your cells, when we're referring to the process called mutation, for example, you can have a mutation through pure adaptation, or you can have an adaptation through cancer, right? That doesn't mean that just because we have like an adaptation through cancer, that doesn't mean that just we're gonna reject it, right? That is completely retarded. Second of all, there's a reason why people make a distinction between a numerical simplicity and ontological simplicity. I'm surprised that you do not know that, but maybe to explain it to you further, when people refer to the numerical simplicity and ontological simplicity is referring to the things given our background knowledge in a way which is actually in reference to more of propositions and general propositions and general entities such as assumptions. So if I give you an example, which is you have H2 and H1 and H2. H1, or hypothesis 1, says, right, your during quarantine, your microphone was unmuted in like an online call because you unmuted yourself. And then I give you another hypothesis which says, well, actually no, demons from the underworld came into your room and specifically to unmute you. Then that's something is what will lead to probability. But if you're referring to numerical one, numerical simplicity is not just gonna posit that and leave it on its own. It's rather gonna posit it in a way where it's gonna explain why would demons come to your room. Why would demons unmute you? That is what numerical simplicity is referring to. So just to clear that confusion out. Third of all, to move to relevant conversation, do you want to move on to generally what my view is, or do you just want to ramble on parsimony?
Yeah, do you want to move on to a different point for the current point? I'm getting fucking pissed on. Yeah, no shit, nigga. So I'm not gonna move on currently. So to address the points you just made, by the way, so you said specifically that it is not the case, okay? That apparently the explanation stuff, or in the example you've given, right, that explanation could be something which is non-assumptive. No, you fucking idiots. By definition, it wouldn't necessarily be an assumption in the example. Because in the example, right, correlation would not be sufficient evidence for the proposition that someone has mononucleosis, right? And so clearly it would be the case that that would not be something which is non-assumptive. It would be assumptive. It would be by definition an assumption. All it means for something to not, or for something to be an assumption, is for it to not have evidence. What it means for something to not have evidence is for there to not be sufficient justification given the current data analysis or knowledge you have. Now, clearly, given that example, correlation would not be sufficient justification. Hence, it would be an assumption. So, I don't even know what the point was with you saying, "Oh, you don't know what numerical simplicity is." I never mentioned numerical simplicity, right? I've never said that I'm appealing to numerical simplicity, but rather what you told me, which is a dumb, retarded point, is that ideological simplicity does not apply to explanations. It does not probabilistically impact the nature of explanations. That's dumb, that's retarded, perhaps one of the most retarded points you could ever make as someone who claims to understand the deductive approach. Okay, it does, because explanations are propositions. They're propositions about the why of a given data. They are propositions. For any given proposition, which has a specific probabilistic epistemic value, it would be impacted by the amount of conjuncts being postulated in the absence of any evidence for why these two conjuncts are true, right? Clearly, and that's the reason behind this is because of what is called the multiplicative axiom. I told you this. You've not addressed what I've talked about, and you always reference these quarantine stuff. Like, don't know what the point is, but look, not address what I'm saying, just address what I'm talking about. Okay?
Okay, is that it? Okay. So, what? Again, I never said that.
Excuse me.
What's up?
Nah, for it.
What is it?
Go ahead.
Dubs. But anyways.
Future mannerisms, Nick.
Alright. So when it comes to, again, when you said that it's referring to assumptions, and then I explained how it's not an assumption, and then you said, well, that's still explanations are gonna be assumptions, and then I also explained that, like, why it's not the case again, and you still didn't track it. So for the third time I'll do it, but hopefully this time you're gonna track it and actually give me a formal refutation. So, Apollo, you would obviously agree, and even it doesn't matter how retarded you are, you're also gonna agree that there's gonna be a distinction if I tell you, well, the reason why I would also posit mononucleosis is because these symptoms are usually in some form of correlation to mononucleosis. That's why, for example, I think that I'm justified in positing this. Doesn't matter how retarded you think it is. Doesn't matter how implausible you think it is. But you would still say that that's some form of explanation to why you would also posit mononucleosis. But then if I tell you, well, why the fuck would you posit that demons came to your room during quarantine and muted your mic when you were in a fucking call? And then you told me, well, it's one of the interpretations that you can take. Obviously, you would say that there is a distinction between these two examples, and not only a distinction in explanation to why you hold the two interpretations, but rather because there is something else. Maybe because one is an assumption and one is a pure explanation. Just maybe, but obviously I'm not going to get an answer from you because you're going to be dishonest. But that doesn't matter. Now, again, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you want to move to the relevant part of conversation where I justify my normative ethics view, or do you want to ramble on parsimony?
You debaters are not real. Fucking hell. It's like the same autistic debate lines at the end of their speech. Fucking hell. Oh, do you want to do this or do you want to keep it? God damn, switch it up, man. So to address the point you made, right? So it would not be evidence, right? You saying that it is the case that there's a general correlation between these symptoms and this illness would not be sufficient evidence. Because we know, Freedagoat, that there are plenty of fucking instances, right? Whereas people have these symptoms and do not have mononucleosis, which would undercut the justification you're given. So it would not even be justification.
Free jail with that, bro. If that was you.
No, bro, I didn't. I didn't do that.
Why is he not
Go
muted?
ahead. I didn't
Oh,
do that,
nice
bro.
try though. I see what you're doing though. I see what you're doing. Like you just, interrupt the person with like a weird freaking sound to like throw them off guard to make them derail. Not gonna work on me though. My memory is like really high tier, top tier, the best out there. Look, so back to what I was talking about, right? So because you know for a fact that there are plenty of instances of people not having mononucleosis, but having something which is not, or sorry, having those symptoms, because there are even more instances of such being the case. That would be a good undercut and defeater towards the arguments you're given. So it would not be just justification is just any reason which raises the probability of a proposition. Your reason does not. It is not. It's not sufficient for it to be probability reason because of the undercut and response you've just given. So it would not even be justification, given the general semantics and given the example you've given. Right now, you're talking about you're just yapping. You're just gonna keep on rambling. I don't know if you forgot, but this is an argument against your view. If you lose this point, then you lose the debate unless you give evidence in support of the conscience. Literally. Yeah, I'm done talking.
Yeah, I'm going to keep unmuting me because I'm currently playing a game. So there's some things there. Number one, by the way, just didn't put that bot. Whoever did that, it was some random nigga named Rob. But yeah, just to get on point, that was very rhetorical and all. But the problem is, it was not very substantive. Do you agree that you tried to actually do something there, but it was just ass? I'm so sorry to inform you about that. But the reason why it is ass is because, number one, already fucking explained. By the way, I even explained that I do agree with ontological simplicity leading to probability, given some form of principles of ontological economy and Bayesian theory of probability, that is going to be true. The one part of ontological simplicity you were referring to is ideological simplicity or ideological parsimony. But the problem with that was that what you said, aka one that is referring to assumptions, wasn't really what you were referring to. What you were actually referring to is explanations, because I already said, right, that there is a reason to why it would be the case that I also posit another proposition, right? And again, I didn't get the answer for the third time to why we should or to whether we should go to my position or not. But yeah, if I obviously if I agree that my position is less simpler and holds equal explanatory power, obviously I'm gonna lose the debate, no matter what its probability or plausibility. But the thing that me and you are currently referring to is plausibility in a way which, if I just prove that I have more explanatory power, there's not gonna be a way for you to use parsimony. So that is the thing that I'm trying to get out of you, to go from this point and for us to get to the explanatory power point. But you don't want to do that, and I understand why you don't. But at least try to hide it in a way where I don't get a hold of that view. So, Apollo, I'm gonna ask you for the third time, and if not, we're just gonna conclude because you obviously dodged. Do you want to go from this
If I
point
say
and go? Wait, I wasn't done. But anyways, do you want to go from this point to the relevant part of conversation, which is in reference to explanatory power?
Yeah, if I claim that my opponent is dodging, then people are gonna think I'm winning the art. Oh shit, look at me, guys. So this is a typical autistic debate bro strategy. So you make a point, and then you basically try to prevent your opponent from responding to the point by saying, "Hey, if you don't move on from this point right now, which I know is gonna get debunked, you're dodging to move on. You're scared of moving on." Like these trash, low tier, low IQ reverse psychological strategies is never gonna work on me, on this audience. It's not gonna work. Now look. Regarding what you're talking about, okay? Start with the background noise. Regarding what you're talking about, regarding the explanation, what I was referring to were not any assumptions, but explanations. Buddy, the explanations I was referencing are assumptions. Okay? There's no evidence supporting why those explanations would be something which is worthy of postulating. Okay. Not to mention, you said specifically that who's calling me?
Hello, Mota.
Wait, hold on. Let me just finish real quickly. The explanation, bro. This guy just laughing while I'm talking. Like, girl, let's have some manners, man. Fuck that. let me just like debug this guy's point real quickly, and then you can like have your fun and shit. Yeah, the explanations you're given for explaining the moral data were assumptions. There is no evidence currently presented in the conversation why these two things would be true. Just you also agree that there are sufficient explanation for the moral data. So if they're sufficient, then that means any sort of expenditure part going to be talking about would be relevant. Secondly, something having more expenditure part than something else does not mean that automatically parsimony would not be placed into consideration. And also, I take it to be the case that expenditure power is less probabilistically impactful than parsimony for a couple of reasons, which I can get into later on. And also, expenditure power is a vague abductive virtue, and I believe that, technically speaking, given the definition that most we use of expenditure power, it would be the case that
But wait,
both theories of hypothesis
no, no, he's
would
laughing. No,
be
he's saying.
equivalent in expenditure power. Wow, I don't know what the fuck they just did, but that's bad faith movement. Watch yourself. Freedagoat, you can give
Who
your.
the fuck? Who the
Wait.
fuck
Repeat
kicked
what
me,
you said
bro?
at the end. I accidentally disconnected him when I was trying to unmute him.
Yeah, Paul, repeat what you said because I got kicked by somebody. I don't know.
I
That
just told
retarded.
you you got kicked, but
Okay, so I'm saying that the abductive part, I don't think that the semantics of expensive power would be something which is able to demonstrate that my view has less expensive power, firstly. And secondly, I don't believe that it is something which is necessarily probability raised.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay. So, you obviously made a blunder there, and everybody who is fucking competent in principles of ontological economy and Bayesian theory of probability would know that you blundered. But they don't even have to be knowledgeable on that. They just need to know what parsimony is, and they would be able to debunk
what?
you. Holy fucking shit, that point was asked. When you say that explanatory power, even without explanatory power, the parsimony doesn't lose its way when it comes to it being a relevant tiebreaker, that is
What?
fucking false. Say that, bro, what the fuck? Chill with the soundboards. But by that logic, not only would solipsism be one of the best views to hold, but by that logic, a kid who says that stars are just some shiny things in the sky would have a better argument than a fucking astronomer who has a scientific proof and a fucking physical proof that stars are actually not that, but rather very big celestial bodies. So that is a fucking blunder. But as for the other part,
Wow.
parsimony, when it comes to explanatory power, yeah. Explanatory power, when everything else is equal, that's when parsimony plays a relevant part, either in probability or plausibility. I don't know what view you take. I personally think it's probability when it comes to ontological parsimony, but whatever you take, I'm completely fine with that. Third of all, you said some about like entities posited being more relevant than explanatory power in your view. That's completely retarded and gibberish. I don't even need to get onto that. And fourth thing, yeah, I am quite literally willing to prove to you that I have more explanatory power than you, and to why entities positive wouldn't be relevant. So do you want to get onto that for the fourth time? Or do you want to keep on this ramble point that you have when it comes to fucking parsimony, which you obviously don't know enough about?
You're retarded.
Yeah.
Classic Freedagoat, guys. Trash Frederick. So let's
Yo,
see.
wait. Chill.
Let's
Oh my
start.
God, yo.
I'm
My
not sure
bad.
if he
Hold on.
knows.
You
I'm
left
not
the
sure if he
game. You left
knows
the
this
game.
is
You left.
recorded.
No.
He's back. Yeah, I'm not sure if you know this is
Infinity,
recorded,
what the
Freedagoat,
fuck?
but
Bro, Infinity just be kicking me, bro.
My bad, bro. Go ahead.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'm not sure if you know this is recorded, Freedagoat, but this is just bad. It's really bad looks, man. Yeah. So you talked about the idea of, oh, if you know what Bayesian probably, like, you do this weird thing where you like try to appeal to people who would potentially be knowledgeable and make this preemptive response that they would agree with you when they actually would not, because we're just pure garbage, just word vomited. If you're going to be talking about the idea relating to, you could say, expenditure power being probability raising, that needs justification first. Secondly, you've not addressed the assumption points regarding what I was talking about. Thirdly, it does not follow from any of the claims I've made that solipsism would be true, or rather, it has the preponderance of evidence. In fact, I don't even think solipsism is something which is more parsimonious than other views. I think it posits more assumptions than an external world realism. So I don't see what you're talking about. Just like you're just lost. You're confused. You don't know what you're saying. Like for some reason you think using words you can't spell is going to give people the good impression that you're doing well, you're intelligent, you're confident. It does not. It makes you look more of an idiot. Okay, so just stop doing that autistic shit. Okay, just use words you can spell and you can understand and lock in. Okay, so what I'm telling you here is that the assumption part, right? You have not given evidence for why this person is mononucleosis. If it's not sufficient justification because of it having undercognitive feeders, it is not evidence. I've given the undercognitive feeder, so it would not be evidence. It would be trash. It would be bad justification. That is not evidence. Okay, I have to go slowly because I know you think really slowly. Now, again, if it is not evidence, then what that means is that parsimony goes into play here. For you to say that ideological parsimony does not apply to probability theory is dumb. Here's a pretty easy example, retard. If you have two conjuncts, right, each conjunct have a probability of 0.5, right, then given the multiplicative axiom, you multiply both. 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25. Probability decreases, you dumb idiots. Therefore, it would be impactful on the probability. The proof for this claim, the proof of this claim is the Kolmogorov axioms. The multiplicative axiom has to be used to calculate the mutually independent conjuncts of a given proposition to preserve the second Kolmogorov axiom, right? Which is a necessary truth of classical probability theory. If you use either an addition rule or a subtraction rule, or even like, let's say, a freaking division rule, then there's going to be contradictions, literal contradictions in the formal system. Okay, so it's an inherent fact of mathematics. Like you talk about this whole Bayesian probability theory stuff, you don't even understand these stuff. Like I don't understand like what you get from going into stuff and referencing concepts you do not understand. You've never done any relevant research into this. You just heard like some freaking trans boy use this word in the conversation and thought it sounded cool, so you try to reuse this in my debate. Buddy, you're talking against the best debater. You're just gonna embarrass yourself. You don't know these fucking concepts. So just use things you understand, address my point, and stop with this corny. Oh, do you wanna move on, or do you wanna keep on rambling on this point for the fourth time? Just stop with that last line. It's just so trash. Just stop, please. Thank you.
I assume that you're done, because you stopped talking. So, well, that was a whole bunch of words just for them to mean nothing. I am so sorry that you genuinely have to debate this way and talk this way, but it is what it is, man. It is just the way that you try to explain an axiom and to explain parsimony as a probability raising. Like, I disagree with that. Hey, dummy, obviously when we're referring to assumptions, when we're referring to propositions, we are obviously going to put them into an equation in a way when we are going to determine which one is simple and which one is probable. That is trivially true, but explanations, aka the thing
Nigga is
which is
ass.
completely correlated to the explanatory power, that thing won't be something which we are going to take into the account of those type of assumptions or those type of propositions you were referring to. So let me explain it at that. So when you have two explanations to why something is the case, if the explanation, for example, the mononucleosis case I gave, if that is completely and directly relevant, the explanatory power as an explanation and not rather an assumption, that is not something which you're going to take into account because it does have a sort of relevance to the thing we're talking about when it comes to the said sickness, coughing, and you being tired. That's one. Second of all, it is trivially true, and I gave an example in which it is more probable when parsimony is being brought to what you can determine a probability claim. And three, when you're referring to the claim, like my normative view that I gave, that something is not the type of thing which is going to be referenced two assumptions, but rather the number of explanations. And again, you can answer my question while you're at it, because I'm gonna have to go open the door for my mom, and I'm gonna be right back.
Is he done? I guess he's gonna come back, but wow, just terrible. Bro, this comment's cooked, bro. If like this is the new debaters, bro, this comment's cooked. My God, this comment's cooked.
Yeah, pull the focus up, bro. You're getting slammed right now.
Freedagoat, are you back?
Okay.
Oh boy, that's so garbage.
Yo, Kuro, for the thumbnail, make Freedagoat Kite. Don't make Freedagoat that random guy. Let's go.
No, Carl. Don't be doing that shit, my nigga. You be making these fucking hell nah, nigga. You be making these fucking PFPs that look fucking relative and shit, my nigga. I'm in thumbnails. Holy shit. Anyway, that was a big winner. Hold on. You be making that shit look relative as hell, my nigga.
Anyways,
Bro, why the fuck did you just say anyway? That shit sounds gay. Stop.
me and Yanni are
That
here
shit
to
sounds
debate
gay as
fiction.
fuck, my nigga. Stop doing that shit.
Anyways,
Hey, yo,
me and Yanni are here to
hey,
debate
shut the
fiction.
fuck up.
Yo,
Anyways, it's not gonna help you.
back. So what's up?
Anyway,
Hey,
why
one
did
more
you
time.
keep doing
Good
that
bitch.
shit?
Good bitch.
Yo, shut the hell up.
Yo, shut. I'm good at. Shut up, bitch. What the fuck?
You have a start, though. You have a
You have
start.
a stuck, though. You have a stuck, though.
I don't sound like that, but
I
nice.
don't sound like that, but yes, you do, my nigga. Please.
You want to debate, though? These gets
You want
banned.
to debate, though? You want to debate, though? Me,
Oh my
These
me,
gets
god, we're
banned.
not. No,
you
we're
want
not
to
doing
debate,
it.
though? You want to debate,
Music gets
though?
banned.
Bro,
Music gets
chill,
banned. Music gets
chill,
banned.
but
Music
chill.
gets banned. Music gets
You
banned.
want to go
That's
down, VC?
all.
Go down
Yeah,
to
the
VC?
unstoppable force is back
Alright,
into
then,
the
bitch.
conversation. Quiet down, ladies. So, free to go. Yeah, relax, boy. Yeah, free to go. Yeah, so just to respond to the points you've made, okay, quite simply, you have not actually demonstrated, though it's not an assumption, you just said it's an explanation, but you have already agreed previously, or already have not addressed the argument I've given for why explanations and assumptions are not mutually exclusive. They can be the same. There are explanations which are assumptive. So that does not go against me. Now, to respond to the other that you've mentioned related to the idea of parsimony and expenditure of power, saying that something is trivially true is not an argument. Like, you can do this for anything. Oh, if I say something is trivially true, then I won the argument. No, that's not how it works. Okay, like I can say it's trivially true that leptons exist. It's not an argument. It's just you pontificating. Now, if you want to talk about the more relevant part of this specific point, which is related to the mathematical proof I've given, you've not addressed the mathematical evidence I've given for why ideological parsimony would necessarily be positive reason or be a positive virtue. You've not addressed this. You just evaded, which is funny because you've been accusing me of being evasive the entire time of this debate, which is not true. I've been addressing every single point. But you evaded the proof I've given for my claim. And not to mention, you have yet to actually fully understand the concepts you're attempting to implement in this debate. Like, for example, how probability theory actually works with respect to parsimony. And again, your solipsism example failed because I don't even grant you being more parsimonious. Secondly, as it relates to what we were talking about, okay, you have not demonstrated why the correlation between the symptoms that you're referencing in mononucleosis would be evidence, would be sufficient evidence for it to be even be qualified as non-assumptive. So that example also fails. So both of your examples fails, your arguments against my parsimony objection failed, and you've already agreed that these two things are sufficient explanations for the moral data. These two things being the Aristotelian virtue ethical view and the objectivist theory, which is something which is independent. So you cannot make the argument that one of these two things are lacking in explanatory power if you agree that they're explanatorily sufficient. That would be two incompatible assertions. So you're going to either have to retract first agreement you have made, right? Which is just a backtrack or concede that it is not the case that the explanatory power works in your favor. And last but not least, I would like to ask you what is your definition of explanatory power? And so, how would it be the case that given this definition, my view has less explanatory power, or the independent conjunct has less explanatory power than conjunction?
Okay. So again, you made a claim, which I wanted to specifically address, when it comes to you don't grant solipsism of even being, more parsimonious. Again, maybe I should have asked this earlier, but I don't really care. If you take for parsimonious to not just be in reference to entities, but rather also being reference to explanatory power, not just in relevant cases, but in all cases, then I'm completely fine with that. The way I use parsimony is basically that something can be more parsimonious even in a way where it doesn't encompass more explanatory power, but for parsimony to be a relevant tiebreaker when it comes to probability, it has to, all that has to be equal, right? So that is the case in which I use parsimony. But if you use it in this way, then that is completely fine. But now that I even have that clear, I just want to then let me just you first asked me what I mean by explanatory power, and you asked something else. I didn't hear um the second part, but the explanatory power part, I quite literally don't have like a specific scope. I literally just use it the same way other people do, and whatever your definition of it is, I'm completely fine with that one as well. I really don't give a fuck about that. And I don't know what you also said something else I just didn't hear at the end. But yeah, I just think I addressed everything that you said previous to that. If you want, we can go to, and yeah, you said something about how I already conceded to the point of parsimony when it comes to my claim. Yeah, in a way that I use parsimony, I did. In a way where I do believe that I posit more entities, I just don't think I posit less explanatory power. Now, the thing in which I think you kind of blundered is when I gave the kid talking about stars example, in which a kid says that stars are just some big small in the sky, then an astronomer comes and says, well, no, they're actually very big celestial bodies, and they give a full explanation to stars are, right? Although that's something is going to posit way more entities.
One exponent of
that's
fourth
something
dimensional
posits
being, and
way
then after
better
that you have roadblocks
explanatory
as being able to create their own
Who is
universes,
doing that,
which
bro?
are small multiverses.
Can somebody mute the 12th Doctor?
Oh,
Thanks.
Yo, Two Doctor, shut the fuck up, bitch.
Yeah. Tell him, bro. Tell him. But anyways, when it comes to that thing, obviously I was in reference to the entities posited, not the actual explanatory power. So in a way that I used it, it doesn't matter whether something is more parsimonious, unless there is going to be some form of equal explanatory power. That parsimony is not going to be a relevant tiebreaker. But, right, the thing about the explanatory power, now to get to that, I am willing to explain how I have more explanatory power even when I posit these two things. I just need you to be willing to engage with that. Since you're not willing to do that, there is nothing else for me that to like debunk. I don't know what else I have to debunk after this, but whatever it is, you can go ahead and I'm completely down to do it.
Yeah, so it's like very obviously like you're losing confidence. Like you got like knowledge cliff, rhetorical cliff, and so forth. So you just know you're just rambling at this point. You're saying words to make it seem like you're saying something. Look, to address the major points you're making, okay? If you're going to be talking about the economy, because remember, you're saying that given my view, it would be the case that I'd have to say that solipsism is more parsimonious and evidence favors solipsism. But then now you're saying that, oh, if you're using this view, then yeah, this would be trivially true. Well, dumb fuck, I've never once used ontological parsimony in this conversation. I've been using ideological parsimony. You said, given that view, solipsism would be more parsimonious. Now you're disagreeing with this proposition, so that's one concession. Firm. Okay. Now, moving on. You've not given any justification for your example was not inclusive of assumptions. Whether or not their explanations is irrelevant. They can be explanations and be an assumption. They're not incompatible. So you have not demonstrated how that would be something which is non-assumptive, Not to mention, you have not addressed any of the points of Megan regarding parsimony being probability raising, and you've not given any reasons to why position is more expensive power. And expensive power, given the general semantics, is the ability for something to explain the relevant data. And if by ability just mean it's logically possible, then yes, clearly it can fucking explain it. My view can explain the relevant data sufficiently. So it would have equivalent expensive power, given that semantic. I think a lot of ways in which we use the word expensive power results in a collapse, whereas they'd have to grant that their view just does not have more expensive power, but equivalent expensive power, given the fact that both views have the logical possibility of explaining the data. But if you want to define it differently, that's fine. Not like it's going to help you anyways. And last but not least, you have yet to actually establish any correlation between something being raised in probability and it actually having more expensive power. You've not shown why it's a sufficient addition. It's like just terrible. I'm actually so bored by this, to be honest. Like we can have the conclusion. Just a terrible performance. Like you're just bad at this. But
Okay. So, number one, I didn't want to interrupt you. But to clarify, there's gonna be a problem in your view if we are using my semantics. After you clarified that your semantics are just referring to that something is gonna be more parsimonious, or if it has equal explanatory power and posits less entities. After you clarified on that, that is not gonna be the case, because then solipsism is in fact not gonna be that thing which is the most parsimonious, right? Obviously that is true. The thing you said something else about like yeah, I didn't even disagree at first that ontological simplicity is going to be the type of thing which is not probability raising. I obviously agree that it's probability raising. When you're referring to principles of ontological economy, which I just explained, it is true that those things are going to be probability raising if they're clear, if they're relevant, and if they're more parsimonious, right? That is obviously the case. But the thing which you are confused on, right, is ontological simplicity and numerical simplicity, which I already clarified. So there's that, and again, when it comes to numerical simplicity, the reason why I don't care about it is because if these explanations are going to be to the explanatory power in a way which is mononucleosis, then it's not going to be in reference to probability because it doesn't violate this principle of ontological economy, which I already explained, by the way. You just weren't able to track it. The third thing, which I think was more important, that you said, by the way, I do agree to the definition of an explanatory power for the sake of the debate. I really don't have a specific scope. But the thing that you said was, I didn't address those main points. I quite literally addressed everything that you said, and not only that, I even further clarified on your points and how they don't work. So that you just fucking suck at that point. Like, there's nothing for me to tell you after that. If you want to debate on why my view actually holds more explanatory power, we can do that. But if you don't want to do that, then we can just fucking conclude, because you obviously fucking suck.
it's very obvious, given this current point, you're just not even qualified to just continue this sort of debate. It's just, your IQ is just too low for these conversations. Okay, just the person point. Now, you can't say my points fall apart when you agree that given my kind of parsimony, it would be something which is probability raising. It would be something which would not be applicable towards the solipsism example you're attempting to give as a sort of reductive. That's you agreeing that my points are correct, that they are effective. So I don't know what you're talking about. You've not even responded to the mathematical proof I've given. You've not demonstrated how the example you've given is not inclusive of assumptions, which are at the same time explanations. Like, there's nothing you've done which anyone can look back and be like, I think Freedagoat did well here. Like, every single time we look back on this, we're going to think you're a trash debater. And that's just how it's going to always be. But we can have this recorded right now. There's nothing else to even talk about.
Yeah, don't end it
You
yet.
just need to do your work now. Like, that's all you
Don't
do.
end it yet.
Just work on your rhetoric and your substance, okay?
Okay, sure.